ahead and call this session. So I'm just going to ask for folks who are not talking to keep their phone on mute, please. And so I will go ahead and call our special board meeting on March 17th, 2020 to order. Kim, can you do a roll call vote for directors present and then identify staff and any audience members present?
Sure. Clausen.
Not a roll call vote, just a roll call. Who's here? Yeah, thank you.
Clausen.
Here.
Eastham.
Here.
Eyestone.
Present.
Godwin.
Here.
Malone.
Here.
Ressler.
Here.
Williams.
Here.
And then if we could have any administrators that are on the phone, please identify yourself. We start with Superintendent Murley.
Schools.
Perfect.
Chase Ramey, Chief Operating Officer. Matt Degner, Assistant Superintendent.
Leslie Klinger, Director of Budget and Finance.
Nick Proud, Interim Director of HR and Business Services.
Jeremy Tabor, Director of Equity and Employee Relations.
Allison Demery, Nutrition Services Director. Kate Callahan, Director of Student Services. Diane Schumacher, Director of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment.
Brady Schutt, President, Iowa City Education Association.
Is that all administrators in that room?
It is all that's in the room. Diane and Brady are on the phone. Kim and I believe Adam will be calling in at some point. He had told me today he would.
Yeah, I just jumped on.
Great, thanks. And then Kim Colvin, Board Recording Secretary, present.
Okay, well, I think we're ready. Thanks, everyone, for coming into the special board meeting today. We've got one discussion topic, which is the COVID-19 update. Steve and team, do you have information you'd like to share? I think directors probably sent some questions in ahead of time. But we want to dedicate our time this afternoon to what's going on.
Yeah, I thought what we'd do is we'd walk through some of the operational areas that we've been working on for the last week and just give you a short update on those areas. We've been using kind of a guiding document, which I think will provide an agenda for us as we walk through today. It'll also address some of the questions that you've sent in, so we may be able to actually get some of those answered prior to you actually getting to the Q&A session there. So there are quite a few logistics categories for us to work with, and maybe just to start with before we drop into the categorized agenda, we've had multiple folks, including Chase and Matt and Kate Callahan, who have attended meetings as part of the Johnson County Emergency Operations Center. And I thought as we get rolling here, I'd just ask the three of them to just share a short update or synopsis on the process that's unfolded through the EOC, just so they've got a perspective on some of the work that's going on outside the schools, and then we'll talk about what's happening inside the schools.
Sure, happy to do that. So last week, the EOC began a series of daily meetings of county agencies, school districts, municipalities, and then had state-level agencies call in to provide updates, ranging from things of how many cases of the virus in the county from when we first started last week, to what supplies were at the hospitals, to how many patients were being treated, and then what was being done socially in the community, and including last week what our plans were for the school district, and then as things have changed over the weekend, how we've modified those plans. And so it's been a very collaborative conversation of sharing information. However, more recently, those conversations have shifted to a focus of what the community, in particular municipalities and the school district, can do to help provide childcare opportunities for healthcare employees and other employees in the county so that services in certain sectors can continue while we see additional limits placed on families and all individuals as we work through COVID-19 here in Johnson County. There have not been any plans that have been finalized. However, there is another call scheduled tonight at 5:30 that Kate Callahan and Amy Portemeyer are going to join to represent the school district that is specific to child care options. This is another series of conversations that we've been having for the last week about how we can be supportive, but also what are some of our limits as a school district, simply because of what had been put out by the CDC and the Iowa Department of Health. We were kind of going down one path, and then with the governor's proclamation last night, I think that kind of changed the conversation for everybody in her declaring of a state of public health disaster emergency. And so now we are kind of coming back to the table with a different lens. We've also reached out to our legal counsel for some advice, as well as some of our insurers regarding any liability concerns or issues that we need to work through. I think the bottom line is that we do want to be a good partner to the community and want to play the role that we need to play as a leader in the Iowa City area. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we're also focused on the health, well-being, and safety of our students and our staff as we move forward. So we're trying to balance a variety of those interests as we move forward in this collaboration. Matt, Kate, anything we want to add to that?
No, I mean, a significant part of the update is just on where the kind of health crisis is in the community too, and to what extent there, are confirmed cases. And I would say, as they continue to monitor that community spread piece, the data they share with us there is embargoed to the folks in that room. But it is a very joint effort between all municipalities, school districts, public safety, community service organizations. And so it is a token of the community coming together and being able to try to wrap around and take a holistic approach to this. But yeah, Chase has, I think, hit the nail on the head with what the focus has kind of become here for trying to keep the health organizations operational and supporting them. So we'll know more potentially after our call this evening on that, about what the request might be or what it would look like, and how we can position to try to help in that.
Hey Chase, this is Janet. Can you give me an example of some of the liability concerns that you're reviewing with council?
Well, I think that's changed a little bit, and we put that out to Joe, and we're going to meet with him in the morning. And I think that's one of the things that's in flux right now, because before the announcement last night from Governor Reynolds, the ask was somewhat different than it is now in our interpretation. Again, we're trying to get more information, so it's very fluid. But prior, it was kind of one of these, hey, your folks aren't working, you're not using your buildings, would the district run daycare facilities in their buildings? And so if it was under the guise of the district presenting it and doing it, I think the liability concerns are we responsible for those students as a school district, providing daycare, where there are educational services? There was talk about using volunteers other than employees. What are the liabilities? We have people that don't have background checks in the buildings, working under the umbrella of the district, watching children. And so those are some of our initial thoughts that we still want to work with Joe. But as Kate mentioned to me, with what the governor put out last night and what we're trying to get clarification on this evening is, how does our role change? Are we simply now the space provider and another organization is going to spearhead the child care aspect, which, given some of the communication we've had with state agencies over the last 2 days, Department of Human Services and an organization called CASA, we're getting indications that maybe there would be an outside or non-school district agency that would take the lead on that. And so those liability concerns would more than likely change or dissipate because it really wouldn't be an ICCSD program per se. It would be something where we're just providing space for those type of operations to take place. The example we kicked around would be it might not be, I mean, it's very different, but the scenario of if there was a disaster and the Red Cross wanted to come in and use our buildings, and that's what we're trying to get some clarification on. Is it just a space request, or are they asking us to run a program? And that's what we're working through.
And I would say the one other
Thank you.
conflict in the thinking or an ability to maybe identify a quick path to move forward is what Chase had referenced there about that CASA piece. Through the state level, they'd asked us to complete a survey last night trying to detail out how many students would potentially need child care, how many individuals would need child care, how many working people we had, some very broad questions. And so we're a little bit unclear if this is going to be a state-run effort or if this, we've had a lot of contact with our local people in Johnson County, but if there's a larger state-run effort, then we want to make sure they're aware of that tonight when we have that meeting at 5:30, that if there's going to be a state component of this, or are we just solving this all locally in Johnson County so that those two don't come into conflict. And so we're hoping they might have some perspective on that too, or be able to share that.
Thank you.
This is JP. One question. Does the governor's most recent proclamation change any of that, or just this afternoon?
Yes, yes, JP. The one I'm familiar with is I don't have a date or a time on it, but I think we're probably talking about the same one, right? The one where she declared the state of public health disaster emergency.
Yeah, I just thought that was today and not last night, but I could be mistaken.
It came out. It came out today, but yeah, that's the one we're talking about. That's the one we think changes the paradigm.
Okay.
So this is Steve again. So I thought it was important to have that perspective because we are focused on several aspects that, again, I think really align with many of the questions that you asked. So we're talking about what does this time away from teaching and learning look like, and what can we do from a teaching and learning standpoint in the interim. We're looking at it in terms of what does this look like for student nutrition. We're talking about this in terms of what does this look like for student mental health issues. So we're looking at this from a variety of perspectives, and recognizing that many of them intersect with each other, but then independently, what is the work that we can and should be doing in that area to support our students, our staff, our families, and so we've looked at those each on an individual basis, and are working towards some solution orientation that gives us the opportunity to move forward with those areas that we do have control over. I know one of the questions that was asked had to do with student nutrition, and we put together a plan to start to address that. And also with the education piece, and I think those are two that we definitely want to spend some time on here tonight. From the education piece, and I'm going to let the team weigh in on this in a minute, but one of the challenges that we have right now with the education piece is there's some level of uncertainty over what instruction we can provide and how that interfaces with the FAPE provisions, the free and appropriate public education provisions that we operate under from the U.S. Department of Ed. And so we've got to work through those, and certainly the team could share some information on that. And then given that, we've got some options that are available to us in terms of providing supplemental education to kids. And so maybe the next step for us, if it sounds good to you, is to talk about the education component. When we're done with the education component, we can talk about the school nutrition component, and then perhaps we entertain some questions from you and look at some of the other areas of operation that we're working on. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
Okay, so Matt, Diane, Adam have been working on the education piece, and so at this point in time, I'm going to turn it over to the three of you to share a little bit about both what we know about what we can and can't do in terms of delivering instruction, and then just maybe sketch out some of the work that we're doing on what platform options are available to us. So, Matt, you want to start that conversation?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Steve identified a little bit of some of the answers we've been waiting on. A couple of the pieces, I mean, I would just say overall, you know, as we look at a lot of these things, it's like putting together a puzzle and then the pieces change on you on a daily basis. And so, you know, all the way back to a Sunday or two ago, we were wondering about sending kids to Europe, and then we were worried about travel out of state, and, you know, then schools closed. And so the education component of that is one piece, but as this situation is so rapidly evolved, you know, it's kind of getting answers to different questions. And so one of the questions that we needed answered to this end were the days going to have to be made up, and, you know, or were we going to be able to count online as instructional hours? So that question's been somewhat removed for us. We know that, you know, the days won't have to be made up, so we're kind of in a, you know, what's the best chance at learning we can have during this period of time, or if this gets extended, what's the best chance at learning we have here through the end of the school year. And then along with that, like Steve said, our special ed IEP considerations about being able to provide a free and appropriate public education, we need to make sure that whatever opportunities we put out there can be accessed for those entitled students. And so as we've looked through this, we've gotten a few more answers to questions, but that one is still kind of hanging out there. And again, you know, meeting with the attorney tomorrow, and we hope to identify, you know, how broad is that educational opportunity piece, and how can we provide some things that can be accessed and offered to all of our students in that way. As far as kind of the specifics of, I think we have probably two different components there. One is the actual delivery of resources and any kind of an instructional component or what that piece looks like. And then the second large portion of this is really just access, right? What do we have for devices, device distribution, and access to Wi-Fi components like that. And so I'm going to have Adam and Diane kind of, maybe Adam will jump in here first and talk through what we've identified as potential solutions for that and what we would see as a path moving forward. While we're starting with this piece, the last thing I'll say as an opening here, as far as the education, we know that's a core part of our mission, right, is the teaching and learning of the institution. But as we're going to talk about some other things, honestly, feeding our kids and taking care of our employees and making them seem financially safe, you know, has also been a pressing matter for us here the last couple of days. So as we lean into this instruction component there, and even access to buildings is another thing we've spent a lot of time on here. There's some of those dominoes we want to make sure we take care of first, and then roll out a very successful and comprehensive educational opportunity for them. And so just trying to balance all of those pieces. But Adam, if you kind of maybe just jump in then and talk about what we think we would potentially provide for some opportunities and how we could pull those together. And Brady introduced himself, and he's on the phone here too, and has also been a critical player and teammate in this work as we've thought about what we could ask of teachers, you know, during this time and what that would look like. So Brady, at any point, if you want to jump in too, please feel free to do so. Otherwise, Adam, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yep, sounds good. So the first piece that I'll speak to, and I know that there are a few questions about this, relates to access. So access both to devices and to internet. As you know, with Chromebooks, they're not particularly useful if you don't have internet access to go along with them. So to that end, at the secondary level, obviously we have the one-to-one Chromebook program in place, and we have a cellular hotspot program through Sprint, 1 million grant at the high school level, and then district-provided Khajiit hotspots at the junior high level. And we actually do not have any waiting lists for those devices. So in the days leading up to the end of last week, we had communicated through librarians and guidance counselors and SFAs to work to try to identify any students who didn't have home internet access at the secondary level and try to get devices in those kids' hands so that they would have access through those cellular hotspots. We still do have some of those devices as well, if we do hear from secondary kids who don't have access right now, but we're pretty confident that our coverage at the secondary level should be fairly good at this point. The elementary level is a lot more complicated. The good news is that we've been working on this for a while. So, as you know, we do not have a one-to-one program at the elementary grades. However, we do have a large number of devices in our elementary buildings. And We also know from the Clarity survey that we do each year that a large percentage of our students at the elementary level do have access to computers in the home. Now, that's not necessarily to say that one computer in the home is going to be sufficient if you have 3 kids at home for an extended period of time, for instance, and parents may also need to use that. So what we have prepared is we have been collecting and prepping and sanitizing, physically sanitizing Chromebooks from all around the district this week. And we, at this point, have prepared a little over 3,000 or 4,000, I think, devices that are prepared for distribution. We don't think that if we offer this basically on an as-requested basis, that our demand would reach that level. That would be over 50% of our elementary kids. But we are prepared, and we have to identify a distribution model, but we are prepared to be able to provide devices to elementary kids who don't have access to devices in the home. So that would be sort of step one. There are a number of complexities there that I won't go into right now unless there's a question about them, related to, for instance, getting the devices back if a closure is longer than the 4-week period we expect. But we're prepared to address some of those issues as we come to them. On the internet access side, we have a couple of options. We have worked with particularly Mediacom and Verizon in our area to identify options either for low-cost internet access that families could arrange for themselves. So, for instance, we've identified a $10 program through Mediacom that for $10 a month they'll provide internet access. The other option we have available to us, though, is when we put out a request for families who need devices to let us know, we can also put out a request for families who don't have home internet access. And we have confirmed with a couple of carriers that we would be able to offer district-provided home internet access. Now, there's some budgetary considerations here, among other things, but basically we'd be leveraging similar programs. So an example would be through Mediacom. We would leverage either their subsidized program, which can be accessible to families who qualify for the free reduced lunch program, or they've provided us a discounted rate, which is not that much higher, and the district would actually arrange for internet service to those homes. So, again, I think that when we talk about giving kids opportunities to continue to learn, the access piece is very important. Those are the steps that we've taken at this point and would be prepared to begin to roll out. In terms of the continued learning piece, I'll actually invite Diane to speak to that. She and I have been working together along with Brady, along with Andrew Fenstermaker, to identify what our options are there.
Sure, I'll jump in. This is Diane. So we've been looking at kind of a continuum of learning opportunities for students. What the state has told us is, at this point, we cannot require that students participate in any of these online options that we would provide for them. So it has to be an option for students. And then our question that we're still waiting to hear from our attorneys is, at what point might we provide opportunities for students versus actual instruction for students? And at what point do we cross that line into instruction that then we need to be concerned about our entitled students and their ability to access space? So at this point, we're kind of prepared for a continuum of offering of opportunities for our students, all the way from just providing some resources through an online website. At the elementary level, I could envision that as a grade level subject area collection of resources that our coordinators could put together along with a small team of teachers. At the secondary, our teachers are already pretty well versed in using Canvas and being able to provide some opportunities for our students. And it might be a more informal way of offering opportunities that the teachers, we might ask them to get online and make sure there's a curated list of resources and just some opportunities for kids to continue their learning. Or we might want to think about how to make that engagement a little more formal with maybe, weekly activities or office hours, so to speak, for teachers to be online when kids could contact them and get some kind of one-on-one support. So it's going to really vary on the kind of response we get back on how that impacts our entitled students. Then beyond that, I think we've really been focusing on what instruction we can get out to kids. But once we get that kind of answered, I really would also then like to go down the road of using this time as kind of a gift of opportunity for us to provide some professional learning for our staff. If we've got, some hours here and days here where we don't have kids, but we have access to staff, what could we, through an online format for our staff, continue to work on curriculum development and other professional development opportunities that we've been wanting to provide for our staff but haven't had the time to do that. So kind of looking upon this as a gift maybe of some PD hours for our staff as well.
Hey, Diane, this is Janet. Question.
Yeah.
Providing opportunities for students to access content online, and maybe it's, informal or opportunities as opposed to learning, but one of the questions I have is, I feel like parents are going to be an important component here, and are there thoughts around how to, prepare parents for how to help their students access these opportunities online? Are there tips for parents for how to engage the material? I mean, I just feel like parents are going to be an important component here, and I just wonder if we have anything for them.
Yeah, they are definitely going to be an important component. So quite a few of our resources, for instance, Dreambox, Lexia, that we've also had the benefit, and I just want to kind of give a shout out to our companies too that have come through and said, even though we've purchased Dreambox or Lexia for a limited number of students, they've come through and said, we know you guys are closing, we're going to give it to you free for all kids. So that's been a great thing that has happened with our community as well. So I know a lot of those resources have some tutorials, some videos that parents can access to kind of help them learn how to utilize the resources. And those are certainly things that our staff could provide as well.
Thanks. And would we consider any other kind of guidance for parents? Maybe at, elementary and secondary levels, like, I don't know, do something every day with your, make sure your kids do something every day online, or, you know what I mean? Just some kind of, I mean, yes, absolutely, tutorials on how to access the content and use the content, but just some tips for helping their kids engage. Again, I mean, I know this is unique circumstances, but I can see a lot of parents just not paying attention, honestly, because they're busy, they're working from home, they're trying to, manage this situation just like everybody else. And I'm just trying to think of any aids and supports we could provide to parents. Tips, tricks, guidelines, would be super helpful, if at all possible.
Yeah, I think, Janet, just to jump in back here, I think there's a couple things I think about. One is, communication even we saw from the Department of Ed today that outlined some of those things about, learning options for kids, and that, obviously, they detailed some things around e-learning, but then also some other things around, ideas for continued learning experiences at home while, you're limited in where you can go and who you can see. And so I think we could definitely put together a similar communication around some of that for kind of thought-provoking and ideas for parents. But I think our biggest asset in this is really going to be our teachers once we do turn them loose with what they can do for educational opportunities and their ability with the things they do ask their students to do. I know they're great communicators to parents, and that they'll be able to, I think, share out some of those tutorials about what they expect, kids to do, and then the same thing that parents can access. Because I understand what you're saying. That's a heavy lift for both. I'll tell you, our staff, was even preparing for this before there was a school closure on some of those things. And so, credit to Adam and Diane in their work about trying to have some of these plans ready to go before we hit the school closure point, into our teachers. Teacher librarians and our teachers have really stepped up, and we're doing some of those things in an advanced fashion. So I think we're well positioned to roll any of these things out. It's just a matter of what we're rolling out. And that's back to my puzzle, analogy was exactly what are we doing? Are we providing instruction? Are we providing opportunities? And then, you'll see, that I think, some of the depth to those things once we know exactly what we're charged with doing or what that opportunity can look like. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I do want to say thanks to everyone who's done all the prep work. I mean, the number of devices is amazing, the internet connectivity options, the material, Diane, that you were talking about. I mean, it is really appreciated and fantastic that we're as far along as we are. So thank you to everyone for all that planning.
So this is Steve jumping in here, so... Oh, go ahead, Sean.
Well, I have a hardware question for Adam. So my kid, of all people, comes home on Friday and goes to plug in his Chromebook and it doesn't turn on. So big surprise there that my kid's the one that has a problem with it. But it brings up the question, so of all these devices that are out there, I don't know currently what our kind of repair program is. I think they bring it in and somebody on site takes care of it. But that may be something we'll have to figure out if there's multiple machines out there over the next several weeks that start to have issues. Not just kids don't have them, but the ones that do have stop working. I don't know if there's thoughts around that.
Yeah, I can speak to that really quick. We do plan to continue to staff our help desk. Our help desk will be staffed remotely. There are certain things that we probably won't be able to deal with in the ways we usually would, and repair would be a good example of that. However, we will still, provided we have any access to some of our storage facilities at the ESC or the district warehouse, for instance, we would still be able to provide swaps for devices that aren't working. And we do plan, and this is something that we don't do during normal operation, but we do plan to publish an email address and an ability for families and students to directly contact our district help desk to report IT issues and get IT support online. They can also, in many cases, it's not actually a physical hardware issue. So in many cases, whether through chat or through email, the help desk may be able to help families resolve some of those problems directly.
So
Thank you.
This is Charlie. Janet, could I jump in here for a second?
Yes, please. Sorry, I was on mute, Charlie. Go right ahead.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I just wanted to ask the staff, participation of all the students, of course, is a thing that we're all trying to work towards. Is it possible during your planning to come up with a method that would let you say after the first week of making these things available to students, to get an idea of how many students are actually participating and what the characteristics of those students are, so we can make adjustments quickly? Is that possible during this planning session activity?
I can speak to that a little bit, and we can certainly pull data with regard to, for instance, how many of our devices are being used. We can pull data with regard to how many students are accessing certain services like G Suite or any of the software that, I shouldn't say any, most of the curricular software that we make available. But again, it'll depend a little bit upon our delivery model. So for instance, I might be able to tell you that a student has used their Chromebook, but that might not mean that they've used it for anything related to, academic pursuits. We can drill down by application, but again, if we're going with an approach, which is still undecided, but if we're going to with an approach that's a little bit less formal in nature, we may have lots of students using lots of different things. And so trying to figure out what our percentages are for whole student body engagement could be a challenge. We can pull numbers. We'll just have to think pretty hard about how we're going to analyze that to get to, I think, what your question is.
Okay, thanks, Adam.
So this is Steve jumping in. So just go ahead, Lisa.
Thanks. Listening to all of you, it seems like the greatest uncertainty is whether or not we're going to provide instruction or opportunity. And what I'm hearing is we're going to talk to our attorneys about this. Are we going to get, or do you anticipate any guidance from the Department of Ed? And if so, have they given any sort of timeline? Or are districts across the state really just going to make this decision on an individualized basis?
So this is Steve jumping in, and that was one of the questions that I was actually going to just offer some thoughts on. And one of the things that Diane just shared with you is, at least at this point in time, the Department of Ed is telling us that we can't make education compulsory. And we're still in dialogue with them. I know both the UEN SUPS and the AEA SUPS have been trying to work with the Department of Ed and also with our legislators to better understand what that means, simply because if that was an issue and we were only planning on being out for a short period of time, 3 days, a week, 2 weeks, but if you start looking at now 3 weeks of instruction and it's not compulsory, I understand that they're going to give us the ability not to make those days up, but there's a lot of content that we lose over that period of time, and we're looking for more guidance from them on to what extent we can and should be sharing specific content-related instruction that's really driven to and geared for keeping kids on pace. And so they've been responsive, but they've also said that they just simply don't have any answers yet, that they're working as fast as they can, and that we should expect guidance almost on a daily basis from them. So one of the things that I think you're going to see over the next few days is you're going to see daily updates both from the governor's office, but then also from the operational department. So whether that's DHS or the Department of Ed, I think we're going to get regular updates. And I know one of the conversations that we've had the last couple of days is that this landscape is literally changing overnight every day. And so, Lisa, the short answer to your question is we don't know that yet because we simply don't know what latitude the Department of Ed is going to give us at this time.
This is Brady. I'll jump in on that as well if I can. I posed these questions and asked for guidance and advice with the legal team from the Iowa State Education Association, because, Lisa, to your point, districts across the state are facing the same dilemma, and they're working with the DE as well to try to get a better understanding of how you merge online learning that's optional but can't be required with the needs of students with disabilities and under the ADA and the IDEA. So that's, I would say, like Steve, it's probably, they're pretty overwhelmed with a lot of different factors, like Matt referenced with some of the, basic human needs that we provide our kids every day in our schools. But I think you'll see that, coming. So they'll have some equity not only across students within a district, but across districts and across the state. That's my sense anyway.
Hey, this is Paul, just to jump in real quick. I know we've talked about hopefully this is short term, but for example, the state of Kansas just canceled classes for the rest of the year this year, and I know that they're looking into having educators work together to have some guidelines and some work and maybe do some small group sessions and online courses there to work through the rest of the year. But I would assume that you guys are also discussing, or the state will hopefully be discussing, if we end up canceling even more days, like how that's going to impact, I think Steve touched on a little bit, graduation requirements and things of that nature. That's all discussions you guys are having, and now I would assume.
Yeah, Paul, I think it's definitely on our radar. As we look at the spring, we have some critical things that happen in the spring, obviously, like you said. It affects credit acquisition for secondary kids, the missed learning, for students completing a grade level. We have state testing that happens now in the spring. We have graduation, as you referenced. And so, I think there's a lot of those things that are on our radar about, depending on how long this closure goes, how it impacts all of those pieces. And so, yeah, we definitely have developed kind of the short-term list of needs that we need to try to address. And then also, if this goes longer, what are those long-term considerations we're going to have to think through and try to plan for, or continue to ask questions and get some direction on. But to bookend that other conversation, I really think, as Lisa was asking about, it's really that difference between instruction and opportunities and how far we can go. We'll probably go as far as we can, right? Because that'll be what's best for our students. But at the same time, we just need to make sure we're falling in line with what that direction given to us is.
So there are other questions on instruction right now in terms of where we're at, planning, kind of what we see as our next steps, things that you want to make sure that we're not, that are on our radar that you may not have heard?
This is JP. I like what you said, Matt, about we're going to go as far as we can possibly go. And then to me, that seems like identifying the teachers who are able to do that and teachers who also might have other, they're dealing with kids or other situations where they might not be able to meet that need. And then I'm very curious about special ed, and I know we're going to look for guidance on that, but we have kids for whom school, that's the positive, that's the main positive thing in their life, and I'm more, kind of wondering about what to think about those, our tip of the triangle kids who, without what we provide, are going to have more gaps in their learning and significant potential regression on some of the things they're doing that are academic, but also behavioral and that sort of thing.
Right, and I can jump in with a couple thoughts there. This is why the closure on so many levels breaks our hearts, right? I mean, because we know that this is it's a critical component of the students' day-to-day experience in just their life, right? And all the positives that come from that school experience. And so while we're in the middle of the health crisis, I mean, that was the decision we were wrestling with internally, that the state wrestled with from the closure, knowing that without that school component, we were going to leave some big gaps for students. And so one thing I think just on maybe the behavior, mental health, and we don't have answers to yet either, but that we're actively working on is, how would we establish some drop-in mental health services potentially for students, or try to set some arrangement up in that way for students and staff that, if this is an ongoing need, what are some of the components we could start to put in place once we have some of those more critical components figured out around food and the employee part that Chase will talk to you about. And so that is something that, as Paul talks about things on our radar that we need to check off, would definitely be some of those key pieces for us.
And this is Steve. One of the things that we are getting, there are many areas right now where, to be honest with you, the federal government has been silent. One area where we are starting to get input from the federal government is on the role of IDEA and both expectations for districts if you are going to provide any kind of online instruction and some guidance for that. And they're rolling that information out with updates almost on a daily basis. So, JP, to your end, I think we're going to have a lot better idea of what we're allowed to do in a relatively short period of time as it pertains to IDEA in particular, and students who receive their education with the benefit of an individualized education plan. So we're going to know a lot more in the very near term, I believe.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I mean, those are the kids. One last thing. Those are the kids you can't do online. Yep, go ahead.
Okay,
sorry.
So that was education. Are there other instruction or teaching and learning pieces that you have questions about right now?
This is Sean. I've got.
This is Brady.
I just wanted to talk a little bit about this state testing and those requirements, and is that all just kind of up in the air at this point? Because I know the time frame is springtime all across the state, and so that's going to be an issue.
I'll just chime in a little bit on that. I do know that there has been talk through the ESSA legislation as far as waiving the requirement that school districts identify schools as targeted or comprehensive based on spring testing. So I anticipate that if, this school closure gets extended, that they will just waive the requirement to do any of the spring testing and kind of go with the designations that our schools had from this school year and waive 1 year of new designations for schools.
And this is Steve chiming in. I would echo what Diane just said. There's actually, we've got multiple state legislators at the federal level who are moving fast-track legislation through to eliminate all ESSA requirements for this year. And that would include all testing under ESSA. So anything that's still in the requirement phase right now is likely to be eliminated in the very near future.
Yeah, this is Janet. I completely agree. Our folks in D.C. are saying all the same things, and we're already seeing states canceling their testing. Florida announced today that they're canceling all the K-12 testing for the entire year. So I think this is a trend that's going to happen and continue. And so hopefully, we'll be able to get that waiver in Iowa, and it won't be an issue for us.
This is Steve again, and I'd echo Janet's thoughts because I'm on several national superintendent conversations right now. And some of those states that have canceled their testing have some of the legislators who are most active right now and working at the federal level to get ESSA suspended this year. And so I think that, at least from my conversation with them, they have a high level of confidence that their legislators have bipartisan support to get these bills through and to get them passed and get them done in a very rapid fashion. So I would echo all of that.
Yeah.
I think in the very near term it's going to be eliminated.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the reality is students aren't going to be able to test. I mean, being one of the testing programs that does accountability testing in like 20 states, it's impossible for us to do all the testing and catch all the students required for federal reporting. So there's no way the ESSA accountability requirements are going to maintain. It's actually impossible right now, given all the closures that we have. So high degree of confidence, just like you said, Steve.
Hey, Matt, I don't know if this falls into this category, what we're talking about, but maybe something you can touch on, 'cause since I've been asked about it a lot. AP testing, has there been discussion about that? And if they don't happen, has there been any discussion about refunding money for people who have paid for them?
Yeah, I think the unfortunate answer is I don't know yet, Paul, about what we could do in particular around refunds. I think obviously there's a lot of conversation about if those tests will happen, or if they do happen, it goes back to Lisa's question around instruction versus opportunity, that those kids are well prepared and have access to be prepared to take that. We've seen things like the SAT for May be canceled and pushed off already. And so as we approach AP testing season, obviously that's going to be a consideration as we move forward, and something, again, that's kind of on our list of things to monitor, and then how we deal with that once there's a decision point made. But I can imagine you're getting a lot of questions, as are we, around what happens with those AP assessments in there. And that's why we'd also like to have an answer to some of this instruction versus opportunity question as well, so that we can position those students to be successful if that's the position they're put in.
This is Brady. The College Board on their AP programs is, as of yesterday, their position was that they'll put out guidance on the 20th, so Friday. They'd had guidance out on the 13th, and then yesterday, the 16th, they said, we're reconsidering, given all the circumstances, we'll have more guidance in schools by the 20th. So.
Excellent. Other questions on teaching and learning? All right. One of the other things that was drawing a lot of attention was where we're at in terms of providing support for kids with nutrition. And perhaps we could get the team and Allison to share a little bit about the work that's going on right now to provide some type of assistance for kids who are eligible for free and reduced lunch, who may be struggling both now and in particular after we return from spring break with food security.
So one thing before Allison goes, and this has just been reiterated to us, kind of beaten into our heads at these EOC meetings, and it's probably just one thing I think as a school community we can try to share and try to reiterate to people asking us questions about all those things. It's just this calm piece, that remembering this is still Tuesday of spring break. And so we've gotten tons of questions from teachers, from students, from parents, from staff about these educational components, and we are going to get answers to those questions, and we're going to provide direction. But I just think as a frame of reference to this whole conversation too, it's just trying to, whatever sense of calm we can provide people and say, we're committed to getting you guidance when we can do that. Because as great as our teachers are, we know a lot of them are chomping at the bit to get things out, but recognizing that we are just 2 days into that spring break time period, and that it's okay, to be waiting on getting those answers and to get that information out, but that we're going to be committed to doing it too when we get there. And so I think that's the message coming from the Emergency Operations Center, is that as many issues as we can provide calm around, the better. And now we're going to probably move into some issues that are even higher priority in people's mind. And those are the ones really we work to try to get some answers to. So I'll turn it over to Allison from there.
So I'm gonna
Or
hop in first. Yeah, no worries. So I think you're going to hear a common theme that this continues to be a shifting landscape in all areas as more information comes out from local governments, state governments, and federal governments. And providing meals to our students is one of those areas where we seem to be chasing the guidance a lot. I think the primary question that we've seen from a number of board members and people in the community is, are we going to feed our kids? And yes, we are going to make efforts to provide meals to our students. Before I turn it over to Allison to provide you the details, one reason I bring up of the shifting sand in this situation is prior to today's guidance, the clarification or the expanded services we've been able to provide were around being able to shift our normal day-to-day operations to the operations we do around summer feed. And why that's important is because there are specific guidelines that the USDA puts out that we still have to follow. And what we're unclear about is whether or not any of those guidelines, now based on what the governor's declared, have been waived. The State Department is very backed up in answering questions, and so we haven't gotten any new information on that. I just preface that because some of the things we might share with you about, like, now why does it have to happen? And it's because all the guidance so far has not been about them putting in specific rules because of an emergency state. It's been simply laxing our regular day rules to allow us to operate in more of our summer feed mode. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Allison, and Allison, I might jump in along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. So what that means is the Department of Ed, the state level, applied to the USDA for a waiver in order to provide summer-type meals. What that means is all kids eat for free, regardless of status. It means that we have to provide meals in a unitized fashion, meaning during the school year, we do an offer versus serve. They have to pick 3 of the 5 components or food groups. In this setting, we have to offer all 5. And we are gearing up to start on the 23rd. We would offer a sack lunch and breakfast. So we are allowed to do breakfast and lunch or one of those 2 plus a snack, but you can only do 2 a day. So we've opted for breakfast and lunch. We are looking at a drive-through service to minimize exposure to staff and to follow all the guidelines that we've been given on social distancing. We've identified at least 5 sites at this time that we intend to provide that drive-through service. City High, Wood Elementary, West High, Northwest Junior High, and North Central Junior High. And then we're looking at more of maybe a drop-off type situation at some of our mobile home parks. Regency, Cole, Thatcher, and Lake Ridge, for example, would be 3 that have an identified need, I think.
And then also something down to Hills probably as well.
Yeah.
How about Breckenridge?
Well, we're still trying to work through some of those pieces and trying to identify them. I mean, it's a matter of being able to find the people to do it and to deploy it in a timely manner. And so we're just trying to. I'm not saying we can't. I think that was Paul maybe, but trying to figure out how best to approach it. One of the challenges, and we'll know this early on, is that during the summer feed we have about 11 sites around the district, and some of those are more community-based, where these are all going to be hosted by us and staffed by us at this point. And on a daily basis during the summer, we only do about 500 meals a day across all 11 of those sites. And so we're still trying to figure out where our highest traffic areas are going to be and how to accommodate that. And one of the things, the concerns about the drop-off piece was, and this is why I spent some time talking about the guidance, is under the summer feed USDA guidance, the student actually has to appear for us to be able to provide the food. A parent can't just come up, or a youth group leader, or a babysitter or a caregiver and say, I've got 12 kids, I need 12 meals. The federal government doesn't allow us to do that. Those are some of the pieces we're asking questions about, given the state of what's been put in place for everybody in the community. If there's going to be any relaxation of those rules and what that looks like for us. So we're trying to make sure that we can cover as much of the community as possible, but as Allison said, still stay within our guidelines. We should know early on next week and get a good idea of how many meals people are going to be seeking, so we'll be able to adjust and adapt. And we are reaching out to our various communities to make sure that we are trying to get to our students so they have this opportunity to be fed.
Hey, this is Lisa. Have we thought about pushing the drive-in sites out to some of our food pantries or other nonprofits in case they wanted to start providing like mobile pantry services at the same time?
So that's a good question, and we've had a lot of interest from food pantries and just people in the community that really want to contribute to this effort to feed students. And so the ones that want to volunteer, we've had people ask to donate money or say, can I go buy food and bring it to you all? And we're pushing those individuals either to the food pantry if they want to donate actual resources. One of the things, Donna, let's talk about later, is we've been working closely with the foundation, and they're setting up a page on the foundation page for people that want to donate money, and they can designate to specific areas. And so, Lisa, the answer is kind of yes and no. We're working with the food pantries about how we can collaborate on these efforts. I just was doing an email with the organization up in Hiawatha that does some of the back snack programs and how they can coordinate it with us. We haven't released the sites yet, and so we're just trying to coordinate the best we can with how to attack concerns about hunger and providing food from a multifaceted approach. So it's still a work in progress.
So this is Rutina. Sorry, this is Rutina. Who would be staffing these sites?
Well, nutrition services at this time. We're having the kitchen managers in tomorrow so we can start talking with them about the production in our production kitchens. We're going to talk to our nutrition services staff about being on location to help with logistics. We've talked to our administrators, especially if we only do it at a limited number of sites. Having elementary administrators come to the sites during that time period to provide oversight, to help with those relationship pieces, because they might know the families that are coming to a junior high or high school to pick up meals. So we're looking at employees right now to man these operations.
And what type of protective measures are we taking for the employees? Are we providing them with masks, gloves, anything?
Well, in all honesty, no, because in our conversations with the community partners and the health side, they're saying that things like that need to be reserved for people in the medical field. We do have gloves. I was referring more to masks. But we do have gloves, and we're looking to keep it in non-confined spaces. We're looking for individuals to stay in their vehicles. That's why we don't want to have it in the schools, why we want to have it kind of a drive-through service, so we can mirror it or model it after some of those operations that we've seen in other communities.
So I think the drive-through pickup stuff is what some of the community pantries have gone to too. So I mean that model's out there right now. That's kind of what they're switching to. Is you drive up and they'll bring the food out to you.
And that's what we really want to go.
So, but not everybody in our community have a car. So
well, right, and that's why we're trying to work and reach out to some different areas of our community to see, okay, can we set, although these are going to be our 5 main sites, do we operate another tier of smaller satellite sites where we take one of our trucks and set it up and let people know so that we put them within a reasonable walking distance so that individuals can meals.
So this is Charlie. This is Charlie. So if I have a group that approaches me and says they want a site different than what you're looking at now, is that possible for that to happen? And then who should I refer them to?
You can refer them to Allison and I can't guarantee that we can get them a site, Charlie. We would still have to have, we think at this point, a district employee there, but we want to work with folks, and we're not tied to any one model or any set location. We want to be able to reassess and make food as accessible as possible as our students. So if you have folks that approach you, please send them our direction, and we can get revised information out, and we can do what we can to try to get kids meals.
Okay, I understand. Thanks very much.
Sure.
This is JP. I have a simple question about especially folks who are going to have to walk up to a truck. Will we have signage, and will we have some method of enforcing lines?
Yes, and yes.
I think the piece we talked about, JP, was physical plant would help with the signage, and so we're prepared to get some signage out. And then as far as some of the management of crowd control and things, not only physical plant, but we'll also, we talked to the administrators today. We had a brief meeting with building principals at 1 via the phone today, and we'll try to use them, kind of regionally group them up with different teams and have them on site to be able to help some flow and traffic that way as well. So I think between those two groups, again, like Chase said, I think a lot of this stuff, we're not saying this is the way that it starts, this is the way it's going to have to end. I think we'll just have to continue to see if there's a better way to do it after we've tried it for a couple days and gotten some feedback.
And I think when we put out the sites, we would also put out the route that we want families to use. Like at Grant Wood, we talked about having them come to the back there in the little cul-de-sac and try to be thoughtful about traffic flow in the surrounding area.
This is Lisa.
And we're also, go ahead.
I just noticed that your northernmost site looks like North Central Junior High. I don't know if you guys noticed or saw this, but Mosley's in North Liberty has now committed to providing free lunch themselves for any kids in North Liberty who come by. And I just wanted to suggest that maybe that they could possibly be a partner in providing space in that parking lot if we wanted to set up a more northern food drop site in North Liberty.
Okay. I mean, I didn't know that, Lisa, and so we can definitely add that into the discussion as we look at where we believe that we can reach the most students.
Can somebody speak to our on-site food pantries that we have at a handful of schools?
I can't at this point. I think that was Sean, but our on-site food pantries at our schools.
Those are usually operated.
I think those are normally operated by our SFAs.
Yeah.
And so we can circle back on that, Sean. We're going to talk a little bit later about access to buildings. That's actually not a question that has come up from our building principals about those. And so that's a good point to bring up, and we'll add it to our list to circle back to our principals about.
Thank you. The reason I ask, right, is that a lot of kids that are using it are getting a breakfast and a lunch potentially already, and it's trying to serve the need outside of those meals. And so, we've talked about providing breakfast and lunch, so I'm curious to how we're going to potentially meet that need outside that. And I understand the access to schools is going to be a big piece to that. So I thought we'd just keep it on the conversation list. So I appreciate that.
No, that's good. I mean, like I said, we haven't had that come up to us from our principals, and so it's a good point to have to be able to circle back to them and make sure that we're not missing that opportunity. Other questions on nutrition services? So our plan is...
All right.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. This is Charlie. I just want to know if you think that we're going to be able to start next Monday, I guess.
Yes, that's what I was going to say, Charlie, is that our plan, we've signaled since last week to our families that we would be sending out information regarding school district operations post-spring break by Thursday. And while there's been a lot that's changed and we send out daily emails updating, that's still our plan. And so by Thursday, we will send families kind of what we are going to slate as our beginning sites for these locations. And we'll obviously keep the board updated that, the feedback we've gotten tonight, we continue to work on this. And so the sites that we give you tonight might be expanded or might be expanded in the email you see on Thursday. But then the idea would be that, yes, we would start these services on Monday and run them Monday through Friday. I'm sorry?
11 to 1.
Monday through Friday, 11 to 1 for every day that school is closed.
Okay, great. Thanks.
So if there's not any questions, any more questions on nutrition services, and Janet, you have any objections, I'll just move to the next area of operations.
Chase, this is Paul. One more quick question before you move on.
Sure.
So you had mentioned that businesses or individuals who are interested in helping should contact the foundation. So that should be the recommendation that we would send out too, as I've had businesses ask, or even the business that I work for have asked what we can do. Would the direction be to send them to the foundation, and the foundation will try and help that out as opposed to sending them your way?
Yes, the foundation or United Way of Johnson County. We're partnering with both, and so we've tried to be central about that. Obviously, the foundation is closer connected to us, and so Susan's been really great about jumping in and helping that. So that would be the first stop, and then we can kind of coordinate from there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the next area of operations that we'd like to cover is our employees and employee services. Several questions that came through from the board members. I have Nick, Jeremy, and Leslie here with me as well, that they'll talk through some of the details on our pieces. But the good news right now is that we believe that we are in a position that we can continue to pay our employees throughout the closure of our schools. That's good news on a number of levels, and we're very happy that we're able to do that. The reason for that folds into the conversation about teaching and learning, and really ties back to the governor announcing that they're going to forgive all of the days that we're not in school. And that means we don't have to make up those days in June. And so we wouldn't find ourselves in a place where we would have to be basically paying for days above and beyond what we already have budgeted for employee contracts this year. And so from the starting point, that is the good news, that we're going to be able to do and pay our employees. There's been some specific questions, one in particular about, are we going to pay subs? That's kind of that quasi group. We have a group of individuals that are building subs that we basically have in every day, and if we have an assignment, we pretty much guarantee them that they can work. We are going to pay those individuals. Folks that have just signed up and sporadically sub for us, we are not going to pay those people. We have people that are all over the board there, from people that work very regularly to people that work once every 6 months or even less than that. And so all of our employee group employees, our year-round staff, and our building subs will all be paid through the end of the contract this year, regardless if we come back to school or not. Now there are a number of other. Go ahead. somebody have a question? I'm sorry.
Chase, yeah, this is JP. Real quick. One, thank you for doing that. And two, what's your cutoff?
What do you mean, JP?
You know, like at what point do you decide it's a sub who should be paid versus someone who shouldn't be paid?
We have a specific position called building sub, and so these folks don't call in on a daily basis to get an assignment like a traditional sub does. They report to a school, and then we assign them. And so if you're a dedicated building sub, we are paying you. If you were a sub that just calls in the morning, we're not paying those.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so as we look at this under that umbrella, there's obviously a lot of other pieces that we need to work through and we continue to finalize. And I'll give a kind of an overview, and then we'll come back to a couple of them. And one of the big questions is, who is actually going to need to come in to work during the next month? And what we have the team working on is developing a guidance document for us internally about who we consider essential personnel. Of course, we know that we need to continue to clean our buildings, and so our custodial staff and some of our facility staff will be on that list. Our administrators and some of our year-round staff will be on that list, because while our buildings might be closed in the sense that we're not providing educational services in the traditional sense, the business of the organization needs to continue. And so we understand that there are some people that need to come in, and so we're working to identify who we will designate as essential personnel. With that said, we also want to make sure that we are taking proactive steps to protect as much as possible the health and safety of our employees. We're going to encourage telework for any individuals that can do that. That will be harder than in some roles than others, but we are putting some procedures and protocols in place and encouraging individuals that if your work can be done from home, we want you to do it from home. We also know that with COVID-19 in particular, there are some underlying medical conditions that can make potentially certain employees more vulnerable than others. We already have a workplace accommodation policy in place. We are going to expand that in this circumstance and make it known to employees that if they feel like they need an accommodation specific to COVID-19, that we want them to reach out to Jeremy so that we can work through that. Again, our goal, while we know that we need operations to continue, is to protect the safety and health of our employees. Leslie, Jeremy, and Nick continue to work on that guidance, and so we will be sending out a guidance document to employees that talks about those pieces, and then in general, just some of the questions that we get. You know, you're going to pay me. Do I still need to use Time Clock Plus? Is my pay frequency going to change? Are my benefits going to change? Benefits are not going to change, by the way. But we want to provide this guidance to employees so they feel supported, they feel where they know where they can get answers, and they feel up to date on what the expectations from the district are of them while we're working through these next several weeks this spring in terms of trying to operate the district. However, speaking of that, right, in the spring, we normally turn the page and start looking to next year. Well, there's some things that we can't do now and we shouldn't do that we normally would do. Recruiting is a big one, and so some of our hiring events, some of our application fairs that we were scheduled to host, those will need to be canceled or at least postponed for the time being. Meetings that need to take place, like many organizations, we're going to Zoom or Skype meetings or teleconferences like we're on tonight. We have secured district-wide Zoom accounts that we're going to distribute to administrators and other folks that want them to make it easier for us to do video conferencing so we can abide by the social distancing guidelines. And while the gatherings of 10 people are for mass and social gatherings, they're also pretty good advice to abide by at work. And so trying to put some of those things in place as we move forward. And so really looking at ways to keep the work moving forward, yet do it in a way that protects the health and safety of our employees and puts the least number of employees at increased risk by making them come into the work environment. I think one of the challenges for us when we go back to who actually has to come in might change depending on what the guidance is from the state or really where we're focusing. We've talked a lot about the meal program, and so obviously we're going to need to work with our nutrition services team for that. But there are other parts of our district where the need to come in might not be that great, and it might never be essential over the course of the next few weeks. That doesn't mean we might not need them to do work. It means that it might not be essential that they come in. Back to the teaching and learning conversation. Adam and Diane and Brady talked a lot about plans, and we believe that a lot of that we can deliver even from the PD perspective through distance learning for our staff. And so we're not going to bring them in to expose them in confined areas unless absolutely necessary. Nick, Jeremy, things you want to add from an employee perspective or other details?
I think one thing that we're really trying to, we talked about earlier today, and I continue to bring up, this is Nick, by the way, we really want to kind of think about, it's easy to get into a conversation about essential employees, but we're really trying to keep the conversation related to essential work tasks.
Correct, yes.
We don't want any, as you know, we don't want any of our employees to feel like what they do for our system and for our district isn't essential, so we're really kind of trying to define what is an essential work task that requires you to be physically present, or what is an essential work task that can be done off-site but may be required to be done. So I think that's one of the, just a lens we're trying to keep going, because I think it's easy to get into, especially under these circumstances, who needs to be where and different things, and we just want to be mindful and thoughtful of that. And then we have tried to look through, we're pretty close to having a kind of a one document stop right now for folks to be able to look for all those basic questions. We know it will kind of expand over time, but after talking to a variety of different groups, I think we're getting pretty close in helping define for what people's work should look like, what does telework look like, all these different categories. And of course, it's going to evolve over time, and especially if the duration of this extends, that could certainly have an impact as well.
The other piece I would add.
This is Janet real fast. Can I just jump in real fast? Chase, sorry to interrupt. This is all really near and dear to my heart, having gone through figuring out a work from home stance for ACT and 800 employees here in our local area. And one of the things that we found, just FYI, I mean, I hear that you're saying you're encouraging staff to not come in. We found that even with encouragement, lots of people still want to come into the office. They're used to it. It's their comfort working environment. We found that we had to take a stronger stance on encouraging team members to not come in. We came out and said, if you are not on a list of people who need to come in to fulfill functions that can only be fulfilled on site, then you need to work from home. And so just food for thought as this evolves. People may still want to come into the office even though they may not need to. Nick, appreciate your comments around essential, non-essential. This isn't a judgment about anyone. This is about essential work and the function. The other thing you mentioned on it, Chase, around the 10-person thing, if you do think you're going to have more than 10 people in a physical location working, try to identify, where they'll be and target your custodial services around sanitation of that work environment, so that those folks who have to come in because they are deemed essential feel safe and confident in doing that. So just some things I've learned over the last 30 days, 72 hours as we've worked through this at my company, and some of the feedback from team members as we've gone through it. So we're on the same path, but food for thought. So thanks for that.
I really appreciate that, and I would ask and encourage, please, if any of you have guidance from your workplaces that you would think would be useful to us, please send it to us. We're in constant contact with our colleagues about what they're doing, And Janet, as you know, this is close. It's near and dear to my heart too, right? I want our employees to feel safe, healthy, and supported, and so that is really good feedback for us as we try to send those messages. One of the things that we've already had Adam's team working with, to your point about work being people's comfort zones, is trying to make sure that we can give them access to documents at home that maybe they haven't had access to in the past. So that trying to take away some of those, I can only get access to this here, and we've looked at ways to find workarounds so people don't have to do that. And quite honestly, we've heard this on our county calls, is it's not that no one's shutting down. It's just we need to do business a little different than we're used to doing it. And I think that's a message that we're trying to communicate to some of our team members is, look, we know you're used to putting paper around your desk, but for the next 3 weeks, we're going to have to look at you doing this electronically from your house. And so that's great guidance. And we're also going to get that little bit, get to the access piece to our buildings, because not just folks that work at the ESC. We have teachers and others that just love to be in their classrooms. And Brady can speak to that point too. That's what I said earlier, is that Brady's been really good sounding board for us on this, and it helped us, I think, avoid some pitfalls maybe that we didn't see, and work that and really keep the well-being of our employees as a focus in this. And so, Brady, do you have anything to add on this piece? I want to make sure that your voice is heard too.
Yeah, thanks, Chase. This is Brady. I would, to circle sort of all around this, I would say, going back even to JP's point on, our most vulnerable students, and I know that, like Matt and his team are working, nonstop, and that's always a thread of conversation, something they always come back to. And I would say with Chase and his team, that is also true of our employees. And, the decision to continue pay and salaries for employees, I just can't overstate how life-changing that is for some of our classified employees. Their concern and their fear about what was going to happen to them was profound. It was palpable. And so, that decision and our ability to do that is really, and I'm not overstating it, it is life-changing for them. And so I just really appreciate that the district did that. Our state-level organization, when I reached out to them and said that's what was happening and the decision that we were able to make, they wanted right away to be able to push that out, use it with our state-level president in a video, and to talk through all of it. And so, on those, that's sort of, secondary to the specific question, but I think it's just important context and information to add into this. And I appreciate, Janet, your perspective, because teachers are going to want to go into their schools. And they are very, they're concerned. They want, of course, they're concerned about the health of their own families and their students and themselves. But, they are going to want to get in there. So I think it's probably smart that we have they are going to want to do work. They are going to want to contribute. And so I think that the things that we're sort of working through as the guidance changed is, I think our clear communication is going to be really important. And, I don't know if that's the specific. I probably got lost in some of that other stuff, but I didn't want that to get lost. I just appreciate the things that we're doing for vulnerable students and employees and our staff.
And Chase, Janet again, happy to take this offline with you to sort of talk about the procedures and protocols we're putting into place at ACT around the work from home and essential staff and that kind of thing. I mean, we literally have a master spreadsheet of everyone who's going to be on campus in what building and what configuration. The other thing we're doing is that changes. We've got some people who are intermittent workers, we've got some people who are full-time workers. We're staggering our work so that we've got some people coming in the AM and some people coming in the PM so that we don't have too many people in a physical location at any one time. We're really taking the governor's guidance around no more than 10 people together. And so, I mean, we've got a whole kind of protocol around that. I'm happy to share what we're doing because I think we've got something that we think is going to work. We started it today, and it will get better as we work through this, but happy to share approaches. We can take it offline. So there's a lot of detail in there.
That would be great, and I'm happy to, offline take you up on that. By the way, I'm sorry, I don't know if everybody else is, but we're getting a lot of feedback. I think somebody might have left their mic open, just as an FYI, as we look at this new paradigm, but, okay, better.
Hi, this is JP. Can I say one thing, mentioning how our work is dealing with things? I work at the hospital, and I do think, who's ever entering the buildings or if people are going to be together, are we able to do any kind of screening as they enter?
You mean like taking temperatures and things like that?
Yep, exactly.
So I think there's there's two different questions right there. Could we do it? It's being done in other county and state buildings, so yes, I think we could. Do we currently have the resources to do that? No. It doesn't mean that we couldn't, but we don't actually have the supplies, and we'd have to talk to Jessica Jimerson from our health services, I think, in that conversation. But it is another precaution that we could look at. We probably wouldn't have that Monday.
Here's the problem. If we decide that we just don't have the resources and we're going to let people come together, are we going to risk this, prolonging this public health thing? And because, like Brady said, people are going to want to do it. They want to come in. They're going to want to deliver online instruction from the classroom. And if we let them do that, and at the same time allow them to infect one another with a virus,
sorry to interrupt, but that's a good point, and I think that we can segue because they're interconnected. One of the other things we wanted to talk about was access to buildings, JP, which is what you're getting to. And so if there's other questions, we can come back, or you can just give them to us as we go. But we can talk a little bit about building access if you all want to, because I think it helps. It's another piece of this same conversation. Matt, do you want to?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think there's two parts to that, JP. One, I think you're thinking through it, and I shouldn't assume I know what you're thinking, but maybe through the lens of, people reporting to work consistently, or when there's a consistent occurrence about screening you before you come in. Another piece we've talked on access to buildings is, for kind of a one-time occurrence to come in and get maybe personal belongings you left at school, or for students that left things in lockers, or medication that's been left at school. Those are some of the considerations we've given access to, talking about access to buildings, in the days to come. In that sense, I think the screening thing would be more applicable, that if we had people that were consistently reporting as even those essential staff members, and they were or essential work that needs to get done, are we screening them? So like maybe a portion of the physical plant that's showing up to work on a job every day, are we screening them before they're able to stay and be on the site? I think those are things that, resource-wise, yeah, that's a different solution for us to figure out, rather than maybe mass, some bigger groups coming to campus for a one-time event and then trying to cycle them in and out to get materials. And so I think as Chase did that segue, go ahead, Chase.
Well, let's be honest, we're using that catch-all word resources, but really what we're talking about in this particular circumstance, JP, is that we just don't have those thermometers. And so we would need to go purchase them, and then if there's any training, we would need to go through Johnson County Health Department, we would need to do that. So I don't want to make that sound bigger than it is by saying we don't have the resources. It's just we don't actually technically have those pieces of technology right now, and so we would need to obtain them before we could start that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's just, there's just a lot of considerations with that. I think it's something we need to probably talk about because, it's bringing more staff members in, just like we talked about with nutrition services, right? And increased risk anytime we ask people to come in and, then screen those folks or do something like that. So something we definitely need to account for, but to say we have an answer, we have all those pieces lined up, would be misleading at this point. So questions before maybe we transition to that access to buildings part, or you okay with us jumping in maybe with some other, I kind of gave you a brief overview of some of the things we're looking at there. We have before and after school programs operational in our buildings this week. We've talked about trying to set a schedule for students to be able to come into the buildings to address some of those things I talked to you about. The same thing with staff. We've had some one-off requests that building principals have probably been trying to deal with for the time being, but as far as almost more of a kind of to Janet's point about locking the building down in a sense, or saying, we're not allowing you on campus. Here's your chance to come and get your things, and then we need you to stay at home. From there, I think you'll see some more from us in that vein after we give them that opportunity to do so. The same thing here out at the Ed Services Center, right? I mean, as far as how we're going to handle or not handle face-to-face meetings, and that, not just allowing visitor entry, I guess is what I'm saying, and then trying to still do the work, with verifications for employment, or we know that right now is a big time for preschool income verification, that how do we handle those things electronically and have, not that face-to-face interaction where people would be accustomed to, but trying to push out some resources that way. So I think that goes to how we'll change that culture of people's access of the buildings and what they're able to come in and do. We've talked through things about, do we even limit their fob, but we don't think maybe that's a reasonable solution, rather just give them the opportunity and then let them know we expect them not to come onto campus and things. So I don't know. I know that was kind of a quick and dirty overview of that one, but those are some of the things we're considering right now.
Yeah, I think, Matt, those are all good, and I do think it's strength of language, not encouraging people to stay home, but saying unless you're on this list of essential staff for functions that can only be performed in the buildings, you have to stay home. I mean, I think it's a language thing.
Right.
And also, you mentioned visitors, especially the ESC. There probably should be some external messaging around don't come, and here's the ways you can interact with us, online, phone, websites, whatever, but to discourage people from coming to ESC, so you set the expectation up front. So, yeah, I think, school's closed, and we need to limit as many people in the buildings as we possibly can. We need to message that very, very clearly, and we need to keep track of who is in the buildings, because, I just literally had so many of these conversations, and, worst case scenario, right? Somebody who tests positive comes into your building, and all of a sudden you have to be able to track who they talked to, who they interacted with, where were they. It's like worst case scenario, right? So that's really a rationale for knowing who's sanctioned to be there, who's there, where are they sitting, who are they around, so that you can have that kind of traceability. So it's I don't want it to be onerous, but it is kind of onerous, and and people just kind of need to follow the guidance to fidelity right now. And people's intentions are super, super good, and they want to do good work, and they want to continue to help support students or whatever their role is. But man, if they're not deemed essential function, they have to stay home. So lots to consider in all of that.
Well, and Janet, your point about their clarity piece is where we're focusing. Really are trying to get into those details so we can be very specific. Amy is working with principals to set up a schedule for over the next several days, down to like hours of when we would let certain students into the building or certain segments of our teacher population, because we, again, even if we let them in there, we want to abide by social distancing and recommendations of the CDC of how many people can be in a building at one time. And so we do want to put that out. And then you're right. We've already have an FAQ, and I mentioned it off the top, that we're going to follow the lead, or not follow the lead, but join some of the other organizations and city and county offices that are saying we're closed to the public, we're closed to visitors, but providing those alternative ways to get a hold of us through phone numbers, through accessing the website, but yes, sending that strong message that we take this seriously, and that we are going to close that public visitor-facing perspective of our of the organization.
So, just a quick question. I think it was Matt who had mentioned that not turning off the fobs. Is there a particular reason why we wouldn't do that? The university is actually looking into doing that, because we know our faculty and our staff won't stay out of buildings. So they're looking at shutting off our cards, and only certain select people will have access into their building. If we're concerned about people getting in, why wouldn't we do that?
So it's Chase, and I think it goes to Janet's point, and we're not saying we're not going to do it, but it is one of those very I can't remember what you called it, but a very heavy lift for us, Ruthina. We have to do each one manually. The way our fob system is set up is we will have to go through and individually shut down the fob of every single employee.
Got it.
And so it'll just take some time. It's not that we can't do it. And again, I think that goes to it goes back to clarity of message, to make sure that if we shut down the fobs of our teachers who have been accustomed to having access to the buildings basically 24/7, hey, look, this isn't because we don't support you or don't value you. It's because we are trying to keep people from creating further exposure. And so it's a messaging piece, and it's just a timing piece. But I think it's something we need to talk about further and consider, even though we know that it is going to take a fair amount of time to get done. Next one.
Okay. Well, no, that time piece is important because the university have us all in groups so they can do it, they think, in about 6 hours, and everybody can be disconnected. So that time piece, I totally understand.
Dwayne gave us an estimate earlier that he said it would take 2 staff members 2 days at least to shut them all down.
He did also mention, though, that we do have the capability of running reports as to who is going into buildings. So if we're finding, so they can run a daily report in a matter of minutes. So if we're finding, because of the fob identifies who it is, so then if we're finding that we have someone who's doing that, we can reach out to that employee directly. So it's kind of one of those ideas, instead of doing the heavy lift on the front end, we might be able to just do a nice job with communication and then address the concern with hopefully the small number of people that may not be following this
Staff-wise
directly.
or campus-wise, if there's a campus that's a problem with it, so.
That would be the other piece that I would bring up about access to buildings is it's not just access to buildings. It's access to our campuses. And one of the things that we're already getting reports on from our principals is that we have sizable gatherings on our playgrounds, on some of our athletic fields. And again, that would be in contradiction to what the governor sent out. And so we're trying.
We need to shut that stuff down, I think. I think we need to send community.
And I brought that up.
We asked for help today.
We asked for help at the EOC, and they said they would have the Iowa City Police Department reach out to us kind of offline out of that meeting to talk about that, because that's a difficult position to put some of our administrators in to, act as almost a police agent of constantly going there and telling people to leave the ground.
So I agree. I think we can put messaging out about our grounds and facilities saying we're not going to allow more than 10 people to gather. But from an enforcement standpoint, I hear exactly what you're saying. It really can't be us. I mean, we can try, but maybe there's other groups that can help us with that. But we can message it, though.
Yes.
Right? We can say on our facilities and our grounds, we're following the governor's guidance. No more than 10 people will be allowed to gather on our properties.
Yeah, agreed. I think that's where we need to reach out and get some support, because, the length of the problem we're looking at, there needs to be a systematic solution to that, too. This isn't just going to be the first day or two issue. This could be, an ongoing, repeated concern for us on those campuses. Agreed on that.
I just want to weigh in because you can't all see my agreeing body language through this whole thing. But I really appreciate what everyone is saying. I think our message shouldn't be less than 10 people. Just don't gather, period. And encourage social isolation so we don't have to send out a message every day. Well, now it's 10 people, now it's 5 people, now it's nobody. And we just right away say, stop gathering in groups on our property. And if you're going to come into the school, we want to make sure you're symptom-free. I know we don't know how to do that, but we want to put the message out. Don't enter the property if you have symptoms. And if you enter the property, stay 6 feet away from everyone you come in contact with. I think we should maximize our messaging in preparation for the fact that, this is going to go. I don't think we have any evidence this is going to end anytime soon. And so let's just put out the message that if you're going to come on our property, you stay away from people. Here are the precautions. We have signage to do that. And then whether it's teachers or parents or who have to come in every once in a while, that's okay, but we want to avoid crowds. Sorry, I wanted to get that in all at once.
This is Paul. I just have a couple questions and then maybe a follow-up to something JP said. Building access-wise, how about construction? Will construction continue as planned, or is that on hold, or how will that impact? That'd be the first one.
Sure.
And I have two more, so if you want to address that one, go ahead.
Sure. Our current plan is that construction will continue. Given where we are in our projects, given what we've heard from our outside contractors, and looking at just the overall landscape, our plan right now is that construction will continue on the projects that are underway.
Okay. Second question was kind of covered, but it's in regards to athletics. So I've got the message through what the district has sent, and then I received some messages because my kids are in athletics. You know, athletics has been suspended, but are you guys being very enforcing that in a way? And I know one of the questions that have been brought up is you kind of talked about building access, and now we have hitting facilities and things of that nature that maybe aren't located in the physical building, but it's on the ground, and it's a building that a lot of people can access. Are those being shut down, or how is that being handled in that part? And then just before you answer that one, just kind of in response to something JP said, I'm okay with the messaging that he's suggesting sending out. Be very cautious of telling people about playgrounds and things that it's our property, because it is everyone's property. So I don't want them to say, hey, you can't come to this playground. It may be the only outside park that they're going to be able to go access and get some outside air. So I just messaging wise, just be cautious on that wording.
Yeah, we'll be careful on that. And the good thing is, you know, usually before we put out a communication, several of us look at it, and we're very sensitive in some of those words, and we've had to be very careful with a lot of word choice, you know, throughout this whole thing, as fluid as it's been. So thanks for that, Paul. And I think with athletics, it's going to be about messaging there too, and continuing to send a firm message. You know, right now, I think the easiest answer I can give you is yes, that's what we're trying to do, is keep those things off limits. I took a couple calls this week about a couple buildings where kids were, you know, trying to get in to play basketball, or they were trying to access a facility or the weight room or something like that. And so we've consistently had administrators, you know, send them home and remind them that the buildings are not accessible, you know, for that at this time. And so traffic, you know, typically for a spring break, we'd have a lot of kids up there and accessing those things. And so I think the word is out, but it needs to keep being reiterated over and over, you know, about that component in a careful way, that, you know, they're not to be coming to campus, you know, for those activities or for any reason, for that matter, as we continue to work through what that looks like. But yeah, athletics suspended. That means no going to the gym to play basketball, no going up to the hitting facility, no lifting weights in the weight room. You know, so we're really keeping those things off limits, and we'll continue to hit that.
This is Charlie. I could go back just very briefly to paying staff during this time. Are we going to be able to pay bus drivers who are contracted by the bus company and any other third-party paid staff during this period of closure?
Sure, Charlie. And I saw that question come through, so sorry that we didn't cover that earlier. The short answer is yes. We are going to work with our transportation provider to pay the drivers, much like we're paying our own staff. We're just working through the contractual pieces with them of actually how much of that contract that is. It's a little bit more difficult to parse out than when we just look at our own payroll. But yes, we've had conversations with our transportation provider, and those folks work in our communities. They live in the community. While they work for a third party, we do consider them part of our extended Iowa City workforce. And so we are going to work and collaborate with Iowa Central to pay those individuals.
Okay, thanks very much. Appreciate it.
So we have two other areas that we'd like to cover on the ops side, and I really appreciate your patience as you let us share all this information with you. And we mentioned that operations and business must go on, and so I'm going to let Les share a few comments about what we're doing from a business office perspective to keep those things moving. Obviously, the budget's an important piece, and so have him talk through some of those pieces with you.
To address the budget, we have statutory limitations of having to have the certified budget completed by April 15th. All of those pieces are done at this point and published, and so we'll be able to do that. You'll see things on the agenda next week, and then on April 14th, that will finalize that process, but it can be done through the electronic means, just as we're doing tonight. So we should not have, any findings that would show up in the audit report for a late filing based upon what we know today. But again, those things are changing daily, as we know. From the business office perspective, we're going to be communicating to all of our administrators and the building secretaries, who are the primarily people who forward us information that needs to be paid, that anything for activities upcoming will be held. Obviously, with the suspension of all of the extracurricular by the state, music, speech, debate, and both men's and women's athletics programs, that will take care of a fair amount of that. But obviously, we've got people out there planning prom already, or it's well past the planning stage, but wanting to, make those expenditures. We're putting things like that on hold as well until we know more. And so that will be communicated to them yet this week. A number of our invoices still come in via paper method, and so we are anticipating actually receiving physical mail unless the U.S. Mail changes their approach. And so we're going to try to accommodate having that and having somebody on a periodic basis at least be available to take those invoices, process, and pay those. Many of those things, not only pass the utilities, but include some things for services to local vendors. So we are cognizant of our piece in the local community and getting paid for those things that have already been incurred. On the transportation side, Chase alluded to it, but I believe the thing that we got from Illinois Central was about 85% of our contract was needed to support them for payment of their staff and their costs, and so we're looking to finalize if that's the actual number from a contractual perspective. But
we've asked for a better breakdown of that because that's the number they gave us, but we're not trying to shortchange them, but at the same time, we're not looking to do more than simply make sure we pay our employees at this point,
right?
Or the bus drivers.
So that would, that's part of the business office and their review of paying things. Our payroll team can do most of what they do off-site. The only thing is some actual physical printing of checks. We actually have a few people that still receive those checks, but there will be no in-person distribution of those checks in any way. It'll all be done either via electronic or U.S. mail. They'll be mailed out. So in communication, just kind of changing gears real quick here. I know time is of the essence as well. But in communication with a variety of business managers across the state today, primarily from UEN or the next group of enrollment size districts, the message is pretty consistent about paying their employees just as we're doing. So, we're right on board with what a lot of other people are doing. The other thing we're doing is we've tried to set up an account to track some of these COVID-19 expenditures that we may take on for, cleaning supplies or anything else, or, if we have to have extra security or something like that, just because we, can't do it ourselves. It could go anywhere. We've set up some accounts to try to track that. So hopefully we'll be able to capture what some of those expenses are, should you have inquiries, should the state have inquiries. I've also been in contact already last week before this all changed with the Department of Ed about SBRC application for additional spending authority if we do have these expenses. They were still looking at it. They're continuing to look at it, but as we've indicated, they have a lot of things going on as well to address what school district needs are. Obviously, that would be offset by any federal state resources that would be made available, and I was made aware that there was a $3 billion number thrown out today at the federal level to go out to schools specifically. How that gets allocated, obviously, if it even gets approved, is subject to much further discussion, but we will continue to monitor that and provide updates if and when they become available.
I'll add one more piece that and I know you probably have some questions for us too, and he talked about payroll. If you remember last month, we brought to you a proposal to change providers, third-party providers for our insurance. This does not interrupt that. It's just bad timing, right? As we're going to make this shift, more than likely not, our employees won't be here, and so we will over-communicate that as well. Again, we can do those things remotely, but it's just one of those pieces where it's the time, but thankfully this is not going to impact that change. They've not told us that there's anything that's going to derail that, which is good. This would be a horrible time to have an interruption of that, but just did want to let you know that everything is still a go from that front.
This is Paul. Just a quick question to Les and maybe Steve. I mean, this is some of, it's good that we're tracking these things and we can pay them if we don't get them paid back. I mean, if we start, it's not that we're going to run out of money, but this is exactly why we have the unspent balance fund, correct? I mean, this is the rainy day that we've been discussing. So if we do have to get to that, I'm thankful that we've built that back up.
The answer would be correct to that, Paul.
And this is Steve, and they already alluded to it, but we've been working really actively with our local legislators that if and when they get called back into session, that there actually be some statutory action to create some authority under the SBRC to provide us some of that latitude to recoup those costs, and they've been very, very supportive of that idea.
I just want to thank Les and Chase for that. I appreciate that you folks are doing everything you can to keep us in a good financial shape.
I appreciate that. So we're at our last area I shouldn't say that. We're at our last area of update for operations for this evening, and really it's just about cleaning. And we've talked on this, and we know that's important. When we started these conversations a week and a half ago, that was really the focus, was deep cleaning over spring break. That has of course changed, but our commitment to doing the sanitizing and the cleaning of our buildings has not. And there were some comments earlier about if we're going to have people in workspaces, will we make sure that we would ramp up in those areas? That yes, absolutely, that's part of the plan from the physical plan. Like most organizations in the area and across the country, cleaning supplies are in high demand. We're working with our suppliers to get what we need. The indications from a cleaning supply perspective are pretty good. Hand sanitizer, that's another question, but with the limited access or no access to many of our sites and buildings, that should not be as much of a demand in the next several weeks. So we will follow the CDC guidelines on how we should sanitize facilities and spaces to make sure we're providing those environments. Of course, a big piece of that, and circling back to where Steve had us start this conversation, was what is it going to look like in our collaboration with the broader community of how they might use some of our buildings, right? Everything we've talked about is what we're going to put in place from our business operations perspective. And that could be changed a little bit based on what we're asked to do in this childcare scenario. But we've already started the conversations with Dwayne and his team, and you all know how responsive Dwayne is. And so they're ready for whatever we ask them to do. I do have to say that, one thing that I have just been not pleasantly surprised by, because I know it of our employees, but it just has really reaffirmed my thoughts on other commitments, is people are so willing to jump in and to help and say, what can we do to make sure that we get things done for the betterment of our kids? And that's on both the instructional side and also the support side. People just want to do their part. And that's what makes some of these conversations about limiting access so hard, because we know they have well-intentioned and they want to help. And so people are ready to do their fair share. And part of our responsibility is making sure we don't expose them unnecessarily to some of the things that are associated with COVID-19. Steve, Janet, I think that really takes us through where we are for our ops update this evening, but Matt and I and both teams all of us will answer any questions that you might have as well, generally.
Thanks, Chase. I think we sort of took questions throughout the discussion. It's been super, super helpful, and just once again want to thank everyone on the call tonight and all of your teams who are doing so much work in what really is an unprecedented time. There was a question that I had, and I apologize if this was covered and I missed it, but we've got BASP going this week. What's the plan for BASP after this week? Or is that shut down too? I'm sorry if I missed that.
That is actually an issue that we are wrestling with right now, and it has to deal with both at the state level. Amy's been working with our CASA submission about what the state is looking at in terms of requirements for childcare on an emergency basis, and so we're awaiting guidance from them, and recognizing that we've also got some municipal partners that are stepping up and understand what they're going to do, and so I think we'll have a much better handle on that as we come towards the end of the week here.
Okay, thanks, Steve.
Hi, everyone. This is Amy. I can add a few things. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Go ahead,
This is
Amy.
Yep, we can hear you. Thanks.
Okay, if we just want to just take the BASP, agree with, of course, everything Steve just stated. You know, next week, if there was going to be any sort of expectations from our families, it would have just been for that short time period after school. You know, typically in the summer, we only have a few programs that are open, and I think our larger issue that we're going to have to tackle is what we probably are going to see come down as a mandate from the DE. Like Steve alluded to last night, there was a survey that got pushed out. We had to redo it this morning. They're asking for the scope of trying to think about providing daycare for not just healthcare workers and hospital workers, but from everything from emergency responders all the way to restaurant employees. So that's the kind of information that they're collecting. I was just on a call with Kate a little bit earlier with Johnson County. Seems like right now what they're just trying to satisfy locally is more for their city government and or emergency responders. So we'll continue to work with them as well as await any further guidance from the state.
Thanks, Amy.
Hey, this is Paul. I just have two quick questions. One, there was someone had asked if when we're doing this food distribution, when we do the food, if it would be possible to have, or maybe you guys are working on this, would that be a type of time where maybe at the elementary level you can have worksheet type materials ready also to hand out if they would want them to take home and use? And then my second question was circling back to the subs. I know we're paying the building subs, and this may be a question you guys can't answer, but the regular day subs that we aren't paying, would they just fall under the could they fall under the unemployment guidelines or rules that Governor Reynolds sent out about how much time you've worked and if they would qualify for those unemployment benefits?
I'll take the sub question and I'll hand it over to Matt for the instructional question. But yes, we think they would be able to qualify for the unemployment that Governor Reynolds talked about, and we can work with them as those questions come to us. And one of the pieces of information we've also learned is that the state is not going to charge. This is correct, right? That the state is not going to charge those unemployment benefits back to districts as some relief to school districts as well. But they should be able to qualify for that, and of course we're not going to challenge any of those individuals that would apply for those unemployment benefits. Turn it over to Matt on the...
Yeah, I think, Paul, what we'll do is we'll look for any opportunity for any kind of distribution of educational opportunities when we get to that point that makes sense. And so obviously if we already had them coming to certain campuses and we needed to distribute as Adam talked you through, whether it's hotspots or Chromebooks, whatever that might be, if it's supplementary, physical materials that you're talking about, worksheets or books or things otherwise, we would want to try to create those opportunities and create some synergy between the food service piece, of course. So, yeah, we'll try to connect the dots on that. I would just, remember that we're only looking at like the 5 sites or maybe a few mobile sites out to, for nutrition services. So we probably have to go beyond that, of course, as well. But good question.
Well, we really appreciate you carving out time over spring break to participate in this meeting. We proposed coming together on a weekly basis. Our next list of updates might not be as long as the one we just shared with you, just because more of it will be on a update basis as opposed to start from ground zero. But we would appreciate that opportunity to provide you with some weekly updates as we move through the next 3 to 4 weeks, just because we anticipate there's going to be an ever-changing landscape in front of us, and we'd like to make sure that you've got a public forum to get your questions asked and answered and better understand the direction that we're moving as a whole.
It's a good segue, Steve, to agenda setting. As you said, there's a concept of kind of changing up our board agenda meetings during this time of at least the school closure time period, where we would meet weekly, telephonically. We would, of course, cover and vote on, various agreements and things that we need to keep the operation of the district moving forward through consent agenda or other action items, but that we would postpone any other conversations, presentations, discussions that were not essential, to use that term, and really focus on what we're doing in terms of the COVID-19 response plan and any issues that are coming up as we continue to work through this. And so there's a draft agenda for March 24th out on Board Docs, and you can see that agenda actually starts laying out what these modified agendas will look like during this time period, where we've got a consent agenda, we've got a public hearing, we'll have a discussion item on the COVID-19 response, and then the action items that we need to address to keep the district business moving forward. So I think this is a prudent thing to do. I think doing this weekly makes sense. These are shifting times. I mean, stuff is happening literally every day, and I think it's wise for the board and the administrative team to have these public meetings once a week, to stay in sync and to ask questions and to provide guidance and that kind of thing. So I think anything that's discretionary could and should be pushed out to future board meetings when we have more time on our hands and less pressing matters to address. So I'll open it up for board member comment on the proposal to modify our agendas for the next few meetings anyway, to cover COVID and then, action items for district matters and postpone other activities. Comments, questions?
Paul, just one quick question. Janet, we discussed, and maybe it's a separate discussion, but I still think the board, and I don't know how we do it, but we still need to have that discussion about interim superintendent at some point.
Yes, we do. Yep. We do need to. Yep, completely agree. That's still that's still a focus. We're looking for some guidance from Joe in terms of the nature of the closed session, but we are hoping to seek that and get that here in the next day so that we can stay on course with holding a closed session on the 24th. And the idea is that this board meeting would be at 5 p.m. like we did today. I don't think we'll have as lengthy of a discussion on the COVID-19 response as we did tonight, because we had to get up to a level playing field of everything that was going on. And so the proposal would be to have a closed session following the board meeting. Open to directors' comments on that.
Are we planning to have that board meeting in person or over the phone?
Telephonically.
Actually, this is Steve. I can just weigh in on it. I talked to Joe about that, and One suggestion is that we may open up a Zoom room for that, simply because then there's a way for Kim, as recording secretary, to take visual attendance of everybody who's actually present in the room. Sometimes with a conference call, and it's tough to see who's there and who's not, simply because you can't keep track of it. And Joe thought that might be more compliant with the open meetings laws, simply because everybody is visible in the room. So I've got to get some feedback on him, but I think that there's an opportunity. It's a very simple process. If you haven't done it before, you can either call in or come in through your computer. And regardless, if you're in via your computer, we'll see you. If you're not, we'll see your name on the screen. So that ensures that the room is actually closed.
Yeah, I think that's good. And but it is not going to be an in-person board meeting. We'll do some kind of connected technology approach, right? So, directors, are you good with a 5 o'clock board meeting, and then subsequent to the board meeting going into closed session, provided we can get ourselves organized for that? Sean and I are working with Steve and Joe to get organized in a closed session.
This is Charlie. I'm good with that.
Activities sound okay? Okay, thanks, Charlie. Others?
Yes,
this
that's
is
fine.
Lisa. Yeah, I'm okay with that. I would like to wonder if we can explore using Zoom. I mean, I don't think we're going to have an in-person meeting for a while, and whether or not we can explore Zoom to open up the public meeting also to the public. I think that you can get 1,000 users in a Zoom meeting at one time, and so I'd like to see us trying to keep these meetings as real-time accessible as we can, and realizing that may not be an option, but I'd like to at least explore it.
So this is Steve. We can definitely take a look at that. We've literally just looked to expand our district capacity to use Zoom, so we can certainly look into what that looks like on our end and what the technical capacities of that are. So we'll do that, and we'll get back to you on that.
Thanks, Steve.
This is JP. I support both of those things. Absolutely.
Others? Rutina, I think I heard you weigh in a positive yes.
This is Paul. I'm in favor of that.
Okay, good. So I think then it looks like we've got an agenda slotted for the 24th. Again, standard business, update on COVID-19. We'll work on closed session following the board meeting around the interim superintendent role. Other questions, comments around agenda setting that we should cover tonight?
This is Paul again. Go ahead.
Charlie, you start.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I would like us at least to be able to consider the Lucas situation and investigation if we need to during this time when we're really working on COVID-19 issues.
I think that's fair, and I think that's fair, and I think we do need to provide an update to the board. And I apologize, I can't remember if we got an update from Joe to send out to board members or not. And so, yes, Charlie, I completely agree. That's a timely matter. Now, however, actually, I'm not even sure we can talk about it right now, but I wonder, because it's not on the agenda, but the closure may have impacts on the timeliness of the review process. And so I do think maybe we should have a quick update at our next meeting on the 24th around the status of the Lucas review.
I'm quite comfortable with following your and Sean's leadership on this.
So, but Steve, don't you think we should have a quick update just on the status of the review? I think it may be impacted. Yeah, I think it may be impacted by the closure, and we just need to have a quick update. And maybe we can do it by an email, but we can slot it in as a potential item on the 24th agenda.
We'll definitely see if we can get Joe to provide a written update to the board prior to that, and then following that update from him, if we still need an item on the board agenda, we can certainly include that.
Okay, thank you. Good call, Charlie. Others, Paul, you wanted to weigh in?
Oh, yeah, I don't have anything on the agenda. I just wanted to thank the team and tell them I'm really appreciative of all the work that they put into this. It's really important. Also, I appreciate the over communication is what I'll call it, because a lot of people don't like getting emails every day or whatever it is, but I think it's very important that that happens, and I think that the messages you guys have put out have been great, and have kind of eased everyone's mind about what's going on. If you follow other districts around the state, that's not necessarily the case, is what I'm gathering, so I'm very appreciative of that and thankful for all the time and work you guys are putting into this.
Thanks, Paul.
Janet, this is Brady. If I could just quickly follow up on Paul's comment, which is, I think, absolutely correct. You know, probably because I'm connected with state level folks, I get a sense of what is happening around the state. And I just want to give a huge shout out to Steve and Matt and Amy and Chase and all of their teams and all of the folks that are on this call. They've been working day and night just tirelessly, and we have such an incredible, smart, empathetic, insightful group of people who are representing, you know, our community, our school in our community. And I know that the staff and ICA are super appreciative and have just deep respect for the work that they're doing. And I think you probably ask them, they would probably tell you every day seems almost like a year. I mean, it's that intense, and it just keeps changing. And they have been, they have dealt with that with just grace and humility. And I just want to just have such deep appreciation for everything they've done.
Thanks, Brady.
Thank you, Brady. Thank you, Brady.
Thanks, Brady.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Brady.
It really matters. I mean, these are unprecedented times, and people I know are working around the clock, and the care and Brady said empathy. I mean, we're leading with that, and people can tell, right, through the communications on a daily basis, and all of the details that you all presented tonight around all of the factors that we're trying to take care of in this situation. And it's all human-centered, people-centered. We're all trying to do this stuff together, and it really is. It's super impressive. And I'll just add on to Brady's thanks. Thank you, and Paul's and everyone's thank you. Anything else? Other directors that want to weigh in on agenda or anything else for the good of the cause?
No, just that was an awesome kumbaya, and I really appreciate the collaborative spirit of everyone involved. It's heartening in this really scary time.
I think
Well, you just
Casey,
finished off,
we'll let you have.
I was just going to say thank you to the board, because one of the things that we've been working very hard on is trying to make sure that we think of everything. And that's not humanly possible with any one person. It's not even possible with a collective of people. And as a board, I just want to say thank you to all of you. When I said, what questions do you have? You were all forthcoming and shared issues that you'd heard in the community. Obviously, there was some overlap, probably hearing many of the same things from different people, but for us, it was validation of some of the work that we were working on. It also raised a couple of questions that we hadn't already answered. We were able to get to work on that. So I just want to say thank you to each of the board members individually and collectively as a whole for your willingness to step up and help us think through this and ask the questions that you raised today.
We are definitely in this together. This is all of us working together. So thanks, Steve, for that. Anything else, folks? If not, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. That was Sean, by the way.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Bye.
Okay, we're adjourned. Thanks, folks. Appreciate it. What a great meeting. Appreciate everyone, and we'll stay in touch, and we'll be back next Tuesday at 5 p.m. Thanks so much.